Welcome to the Decipher podcast. I'm Dennis Fisher. I'm here at Black Hat with my friend Matt Johansen from Reddit. Thanks for coming up, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, buddy.
Another Black Hat.
I know. This is 24th for me.
Wow.
Not counting 2020 because
Yeah.
it didn't happen. But
You never missed one. Wow.
It's crazy.
I think I've missed one or two, and then COVID, but maybe 15 years ago might have been my first one. So.
I think that's probably where I met you.
2009.
It must have been,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gosh, that's crazy. I saw our old friend Jeremiah yesterday, which is cool. I haven't seen that guy in a long time. But
One of my first bosses in
the best.
InfoSec. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like to say, my first Black Hat, it was like 2008, 2009, something like that. I met, Jeremiah, Ali Miller, Chris Hoff, my boss at some point in my career, right? I met all these people at Black Hat, like over cigars.
It's so funny how it all just sort of comes around
Yeah.
full circle like that.
Yeah.
I love it. What have you seen at the conference so far? I know you haven't had time to go to talks or anything like that, but what's been your sort of overall impression so far?
It feels like we're back, right? The COVID years were a little quiet, obviously,
Yeah.
right? But this feels very, very normal to me. I think so far my favorite has been Hallway Con, outside Libertine Social.
Yeah.
It's just been like my default. Let me go park over there and see everybody I want to see.
Right.
That's where I first saw you this week.
Yep.
it works.
It does.
Yeah, that's been great. My other favorite part, I did sneak into the booth area, literally sneak into the booth area yesterday, and the startup alley was really, really cool and vibrant, and not a lot of BS peddling. Not a lot of
Not all AI?
No. Obviously it was there. I went and made sure to have a conversation with a bunch of them over there, especially people that I didn't know, but I got to see a bunch of people that I do know. Signal Sciences crew probably has 4 companies that people that have worked at Signal Sciences that, I was an advisor for Signal Sciences back in the day.
Yeah.
Right? Big fan, big friend of that company. They've got just employees that have started 4 or 5 different companies in that alley. And then my other favorite thing was the Innovators Summit.
Is that cool?
Yeah, it was mostly founders and VCs in the room. And George from CrowdStrike got up on stage that morning.
I heard.
Really just impressed that he was here. Impressed that he convinced a lawyer that he could be here.
I was going to say that, yeah.
I think he said all the right things. I think the room was really just happy to have him and had his back. Everyone in the room kind of realized it could have been any of us.
That's the whole thing.
And I don't think a lot of people could have been in the same shoes 2 weeks after or something like that, would have been able to have the guts to get on stage in front of a crew like that.
I mean, it helps that he's had successes, and everybody in that room knows him.
Yeah.
He's been here for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, that takes a lot of guts to get up there and just even show your face, let alone whatever you talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, they didn't shy away from the topic. They actually kicked off with it. He was on that panel already, right? And then 2 weeks ago, the disaster struck.
Yeah.
And that's what they started off with and whatever. But honestly, besides him, that Innovator Summit was actually really, really cool, really well run, really great content on stage, some kind of networking. Met a lot of really cool people there too.
It wasn't just VCs and founders slapping each other on the back for being successful.
No, it was a lot. People were asking, some VCs were on stage and they were getting asked hard questions. Here was a good one. So someone from Greylock was on stage. I'm forgetting their name at the moment, but and they gave one of the early talks in the morning, I guess the keynote. It was mostly panels from there on, and this was just this guy on Greylock on stage. And Caleb Sima was interviewing him on stage after the talk. And one of the questions from the crowd was, hey, 50% of revenues in cybersecurity are services based. Why don't VCs back services companies? I thought that was a really interesting question. I don't exactly remember the answer to do it justice here, but no, not a lot of back patent.
That is a good question because there are so many, even, say a company like CrowdStrike, they also sell services. You almost have to in security, but a pure services company is probably a much harder.
You're not getting investment.
No. Because there's nothing that the VCs can point to and be like, that's what you do.
Yeah, here's the hockey stick based on this SaaS tool.
Yeah.
Throw money in this hole and $10 more come out this hole.
Right.
It's software, is the software trick. And when there's humans in the loop, it's throw way more money in this hole and 3 times the money comes out this hole. But 50% of, I was I'd never really heard it put like that.
I don't know where that number came from.
Me neither. I'd have to verify, but no one questioned it. I'd like to go verify. But even if it's not 50, it's a good chunk, right? To say, hey, why aren't there VC dollars in services companies? It's a good one.
I was with a bunch of the former At Stake people yesterday, and a lot of them, you talk about people that have gone on to found
OG
companies.
crew, yeah.
Literally, everybody down there should thank them all. They were a product company, but then immediately started selling services, And that's what took off for them. I mean, they were the original AppSec consulting company, and everybody has kind of followed that lead.
A lot of the software companies that you know as SaaS companies, there might be a bit of a curtain and some humans behind, especially early stages, right? I've heard stories of early stage software companies where it was like, oh no, that's actually, a group of low wage employees that are doing a lot of that, right? And then, okay, now they got some revenue and the software actually works and whatever, right?
It reminds me, I went to the keynote this morning with Moxy Marlin Spike, who I haven't seen in a really long time.
One of the best presenters on the planet too.
Wild. It was so good.
Was it good? Cool.
It was great. And he went through this whole 35-minute presentation, and kind of the whole wrap up of it was, everybody in this room has spent a ton of time building software that nobody really understands how it works. He's like, I don't understand how most software works. And he built Signal, so that guy knows what he's doing. We built all these complex systems that we thought we were going to then use to teach non-computer people how to be like us. He's like, that hasn't worked, obviously. Non-computer people still don't understand how software works, right? But the security research that everybody is doing to sort of look inside of all of that and abstract it away and make it a little less complex is the really important part, which I thought was a cool point.
It is a cool point.
Yeah.
It is a cool point. I've heard a similar point about the millennial generation was much more tech savvy than the previous generation, just by nature of growing up with computers in their bedrooms much more popularly, things like that. Now and people kind of just thought oh, what's the next generation going to be? Even more technical, and it's actually reverted.
Yes.
And this is because the theory, the theory, and I actually like this, is because computers just work a whole lot better now. When I was, coming up on Windows, 3.1, 95, 98, it's if you wanted that thing to work, you had to know how to go into the settings and get things to work. My first job was at a help desk. Oh my God, how many people did I help clean viruses off their XP machine in college, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I became tech savvy, became the tech guy. And it's now everyone's got a MacBook that never breaks. You don't have to restart it.
No.
Who knows where the control panel is?
I don't, and I use it every day.
Right?
I have no idea.
And so it's not necessary, right? You're even modern Windows boxes and your iPhone or whatever it is, it just works.
Yeah.
So it's you're kind of losing some of it.
I'm older than you are by a little bit, but growing up, my dad taught me how to code in DOS. I had to learn DOS, and he worked at IBM, so he was like, you're going to learn how to do this. It's going to be important. And this is 1985 or whatever. And it was, but then really 15 years later, it wasn't important at all. I didn't need to know how to do that stuff. And my kids will never know how computers work. They don't need to.
Yeah.
They just have Chromebooks or MacBooks, and you turn it on, and it works all day. Plug it in every couple days. It's fine.
I got to renew a lease for an IP address. All this stuff that I used to have to do with Windows XP. I was a god on my college campus because I kept everyone's Xboxes working, right? But
that's what's important on a college campus, man.
I also had the key to the server rack downstairs, so I could put people on the fast switch. Hey, my old college professor's watching. No, I didn't, but yeah.
At Reddit, I mean, you guys are a pretty prevalent company on the internet. Literally, the front page of the internet is your slogan. So, as the head of AppSec there, what are I know you think a lot about vulnerability management and that kind of stuff. What's your approach to building out a vuln management program for a platform that is kind of infrastructure?
It's a really interesting problem that I've been tackling. I'm coming up on 3 years there at this point, which is kind of weird. But yeah, so I think a lot of traditional security programs and vulnerability management programs, even ones that I've worked in, I like to call it vulnerability whack-a-mole. What tool can you scan most accurately, most quickly, and find as many vulnerabilities as possible, get them into some sort of machine grinder that prioritize them magically. And there's whole companies that have existed to create this machine grinder to help you kind of track and prioritize, finding and fixing all these vulnerabilities. It's a Sisyphean task. It never ends, right? And so I've found that it's much more valuable, and a lot of the effort that I'm having my team focus on nowadays is, I really don't want to use this term, but the shift left mentality, right? But I'm not saying it in the way that we've been saying it for the last 10 years. I mean, literally, my security engineers need to go live, eat, and breathe with the non-security engineers, the engineers who are building the platform. And it's understand their lives. And I was reminded of some of the Reddit team was out here this week, and we had some of our cross-functional partners out here, including developer experience team. And we've worked really closely with them. And I wrote something on social media a few months ago that said a lot of security problems are actually developer experience problems.
Yeah.
I was sitting in the room with my team, and all of a sudden my tweet is on the slide, because the guy from DevX is there, and he goes, Matt said this, and I agree with Matt. But I think it's true. I think if you give your developers the right tool, no developer wakes up in the morning and goes, I can't wait to write some vulnerabilities today. It's not a thing, right? And so they want to write good, secure code. So if you can give them the right tools and the right guardrails and the right secure by defaults, that it makes it impossible or much more difficult for them to write something like cross-site scripting. They don't need to know what cross-site scripting is or how to prevent it. If you can give them like the right tool that says, hey, this is the safe way to do this thing that you were trying to do. So that's what my AppSec team is more focused on these days, right? It's like, okay, how can we build these nice soft glove guardrails, right? And a nice developer experience that everyone's happy. And then, okay, what are our fail safes when that doesn't work? How do we find the rest that goes through the cracks? And then every time we do find something that goes through the cracks, how do we make sure that never happens again? What went wrong with the guardrail? How did that happen? Right? And so that's what we're more focused on now.
Have you seen good results from that?
Yeah, absolutely. Knock on wood. We have a bug bounty program. Please go submit bugs and I will pay you handsomely for them. I run the bug bounty program. Seriously, take my money. I love my bug bounty researchers. We have some good ones that are avid on our program. Major cross-site scripting bugs trending down due to things like this, due to things like CSP, which is just like prevent cross-site scripting instead of try to find every single one, right? It's like, oh, let's put our effort here. Things like SSRF, like we were stubbing our toe on, and really that's just making HTTP requests unsafely. It's like, we'll give the developer the way to do it safely. We looked across our code platform and we were making these kinds of requests like over 50 different ways. Well, of course we're stubbing our toe, right? Yeah. And then Reddit will go and acquire a company and bring in their code base. And it's like, oh, well, this has not had any of the safety mechanisms built into it yet. It's like, okay, well, let's go do that as we transition it in, right? The results are great.
How much of the software that you got that like runs Reddit is written internally? Is like all of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, everyone's got like the supply chain packages, like whatever the heck Python packages are under the hood. But
yeah.
A lot of it was written a long time ago.
I was going to say that.
Reddit is like this 18-year-old startup. I unironically say helping secure the internet on my LinkedIn thing because I equate Reddit with the internet. That's why I took the job.
I had this interesting conversation yesterday with a startup founder, and he was talking about how, and you're of the generation like you grew up like trying to find bugs and learning how to write exploits, right? Like that was the whole.
That's it. I grew up on the offensive side. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So we were talking about like what attacks actually matter now, and he was talking about how like exploits aren't really like a big deal anymore. Like a lot of what happens is, there's a lot of social engineering attacks, like the stuff that Scattered Spider does or those kind of things, and it's all humans making mistakes in other ways. So like the whole, is this 0 day going to be exploited in the next week thing? How much do you think about that at all as opposed to like the more like attacks on identity platforms or the social engineering side of things?
It's a great question. It's a great point. I think this is where threat modeling comes in really handy, right? Because it's like, you can't ignore the vulnerabilities. You can't just be like, oh yeah, I've got this hyper public CVE that exists that is in Metasploit, and it's on an internet-facing box on my network, that's going to get popped. So you can't just say no. But I do agree that I think a lot of like the incidents that you read about in the news, like how many of those are related to someone actually exploiting a vulnerability in like a package?
It's relatively low.
It's going lower, right? I think the DBIR this year did say like, oh, vulns are back, right? Like, and they were saying that they're seeing a bit of a resurgence in that. And so, you can't ignore it. But I don't think most companies out there, you don't need your security program to be finely tuned to like catch the first 0 day that like comes out the moment it comes out if you don't even have phishing solved. Absolutely build the foundation of like, hey, do all your employees have some sort of like, phish-proof hardware token, like a YubiKey or something like that? Do all your employees, do you have a way to understand the proliferation of like SaaS identities out there? I've seen wildly varying stats on how many SaaS companies a lot of companies are out there using, and it's in the hundreds. And each one of those has their own identity, right? Even if you have an SSO platform, it's still tied to a token somewhere on that other thing, right? And so that's how like we're sitting in Vegas, had one of the biggest attacks like this last summer, right? The MGM Caesars one.
Exactly.
It was a phished SSO credential, I believe an Okta credential, that then you had access to anything beyond that. What you have to do is like build a lot of these automations, right? Detect this stuff and then be able to either stop it at the door, right, with the preventions, or if it happens, be able to shut down all those identities instantly. And a lot of people don't even have that capability.
Oh, I'm sure not.
Yeah.
Even like mature security organizations probably don't.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. Like SSO is pretty scary. A lot of people are like looking at Okta and going, are we sure that this is the whole industry wants to do this? Okay. It's scary. It's how a lot of us are getting popped right now.
Yeah, and I don't know what the answer to that problem is. I mean, SSO is great in terms of usability and user experience, but what you just described,
one
like
cred, and then they get into whatever they want.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is.
Coinbase has a public incident like debrief with it. They got popped by a phishing attack on Okta, and they claim, and I've talked to some of their team, and they said it was accurate that they shut it down in 10 minutes. In sub 10 minutes.
That's pretty impressive.
That's darn near instant, right? And that's fast enough that the threat actors aren't getting the crown jewels out the door at that point, right? In order to do that, you have to have a very mature security operations center, like filled with automation. You can't, like, if that happens at 1 a.m, whose eyes on the screen, right? So it's like, okay, this got compromised. We recognize it got compromised. This account is doing weird stuff. Okay, go shut. Big red button, like, go shut this employee's account down everywhere. And I suggest everyone make that action with bias. Much easier to have like a hard conversation with one of your employees.
Yes.
In the morning. Yeah. Like, oh, sorry, whatever you were doing was looking pretty weird, so we shut you down. We'll get you reactivated.
Right.
Way easier of a conversation than, oh crap, everything went out the door last night.
I assume you've had to make those decisions at varying points. Like, how hard is it to, like, your fingers, there's not actually a big red button, but like you make that decision. Like,
I want one. I want to rig
you should get one.
An easy button that like kills all Okta accounts or something like that. Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, it's a hard call. I'll tell you the easiest way to make that call is make it after an incident. You have an incident,
then you have
all of a
proof,
sudden everyone's
like,
very agreeable to make this user experience hit.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, no, it again, I brought it up earlier. It's about threat modeling, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, what's your attack surface look like? What's your company's risk profile look like? You know, are you being attacked constantly? Are you on nation state like radar? You have a whole different story to tell. I've worked in big financial environments. That's a whole different story to tell then. If Reddit goes down, everyone's paycheck still clears.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, if the bank goes down.
So yeah, at my time, I spent 5 years at B of A, for those that don't know, right? And ran their vulnerability management program. Way different set of circumstances, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't wield nearly as big of a stick there.
How different is that at a big financial institution than it is at like
couldn't be more different.
Platform provider?
Yeah, couldn't be more different, right? If anyone's worked at the big financials, yeah, things move slower and they have to, right? Like, we went in there, you know all the people that got hired there. They're friends, they're industry people, they're not bank people, right? They went in there, we went in there with like fresh eyes, fresh knowledge, fresh take on the thing from the industry, right? And yeah, it's culture shock, right? It was rough, but after a little while, you start to realize why. It's like, oh yeah, like this is. Yeah.
If something
we
goes
come in
wrong
here with
here,
our big brains from like, oh, look what I did at this cool startup. Like, oh, let me show you my Kubernetes skills. And they're like, hey, so the mainframe doesn't have Kubernetes on it, right? And it's like, oh, right. Yeah, okay.
Also, we have 47 different regulators
that
are looking at literally everything you do.
Yeah. So and like global economic impacts if things go wrong, right?
So you can't just make snap decisions to be like, hey, we're using this now. We're shut. No.
That startup that I was running for security for, no one would have noticed if we went offline for a little while, right? It's like, you do something wrong. I mean, look at the CrowdStrike thing, right? That had global economic impacts, right? Really impacted people's lives, right? And imagine that happened. Imagine a bank went down, not just airlines and some other stuff.
Yep.
Right? It's like, hey, okay. They're going to point to that. People at large financial institutions are going to point to that incident and see, like, see, that's why I said no to your agent that you wanted to do your cool security thing.
Oh, I promise. That's exactly what's been happening the last 2 weeks.
100%.
I'm sure.
And they're right.
Yeah. Which is crazy to think about because assume that, like, from the outside, anybody that hasn't worked in what you just described, you think, okay, this is a bank. They have literally all the money in the world. They can buy whatever tools they want. They must have the most advanced stuff in there and move at lightning speed. And you're like, oh no, it's the opposite. Yes, we have advanced tools
not the opposite.
And smart people, but
lightning speed is a stretch. But yes, they do have a giant team full of very smart people, right? Some of the smartest crypto people I've ever met work there, right? Literally wrote the spec for like some of the cloud bring your own key crypto things were like written side by side, shoulder by shoulder with like Rasinovich at Microsoft and Bank of America people whiteboarding together. I mean, really, really, really top-notch people. So I don't mean to like despair that like, oh, move slower. I'm just saying it's a different risk profile than what I'm dealing with right now. You know, I can fire up like whatever tool, any tool on that floor right now. I could like point at like Reddit's code base or something like that, you know, or let me fire a scan off or something like that, right? And it's okay.
Which one is more stressful, like the old financial job or this one? Like
it's different stress, man. Different stress. It's like honestly, even though Reddit's a mature company, we've IPO'd it. You know, we're not a small company by any means. Still feels very startup, Silicon Valley vibes, right? Like very high tech, move fast, break things, that kind of thing. Yeah, the bank. I mean, I had people on my team working in Singapore. I'm on the phone at 1:00 in the morning during some O-Day, right? I somehow lucked out and was in between jobs during Log4j. At both of my jobs on either end of that, it would have been my responsibility. And I was like sipping Mai Tais or whatever I was doing, right? So I lucked out. But I mean, anything like that, like a Log4j type incident, right? I mean, that was stressful. You know, you're at a global financial institution. I don't think I spent a July 4th off an incident bridge. You know what I mean? Like we had a lot, and it didn't matter what time it was. You know what I mean? So I was the guy that knew how to find the vulns on the network. You know, CISO read a headline. I got a call. Hey, do we have this vuln? Okay, let me get to work.
That doesn't seem like, I mean, a recipe for long-term mental health. Honestly, like I know this is something that you think about quite a lot personally.
Like, oh, you're talking to me, man.
I am talking to you. I know, but even just our friends and everyone downstairs right now, like. The burnout thing is real, like, but like just that level of like constant, like underlying something could go wrong, like this thing in my pocket could ring and like my vacation is torched.
Yeah, absolutely. It's happened to all of us, right? Like, I mean, we make a joke about it. One of our most senior guys at Reddit was in the Dominican Republic during one of our largest security incidents, and we say, you're not allowed to leave the country anymore, man. You're not allowed to go on vacation.
Sorry,
right?
You're bad luck.
No, so yeah, it absolutely happens. And yeah, I don't use the burnout term as much because it seems overplayed, and I feel like people kind of just like glaze over when you start to say it. But I think there are like very like real world consequences of working on the front lines in this industry. I think that, I mean, no, you said people downstairs. A lot of the people downstairs are not on the front lines.
No, that's true.
A lot of people downstairs are building tools to try to sell to guys like me, first of all, which is fine. Like I love this community. I love this industry. I'm just saying the whole burnout thing. Okay, go on the front lines for a little while, right? Our friend Alex Hutton had like a really good way of putting this, where we would like we worked together and we would go to a different office where like a different department, more business operations type department, right? And the way he described it was, he's like, you ever see those videos of Vietnam where the guys are coming back out of the mud and they're covered in like dirt and mud and blood and like the 1,000-yard stare, and they're walking back into Saigon and everyone's still just having tea at cafes, sitting outside. He described it like that. He's like, it felt like we were walking to this office just like covered in blood and guts, and everyone's like, hey, did you get that spreadsheet that like I sent you last week? And it's like, you just want to shake them.
Yeah,
right?
Did you see the Yankees game last night? You're like, what month is it?
Exactly, right? And that's how it feels sometimes, right? When you're in the thick of it. And so I think that's a really good description of different parts of this industry. And yeah, just like, and not to like compare us to actual war or anything like that, but similarly, mental health concerns, right? In terms of, hey, you got to take care of yourself. You got to make sure that you can turn that off at some point and recharge, whatever that means for you. Right?
And that's not a simple thing. Like it's easy to say, like, hey, you got to just shut down and unplug and go sit on the beach. Like Realistically, you can't do that.
That's not what I mean. You can't do that often enough.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you need something in your day-to-day life.
Yes.
That like leave something at the desk, and then like go do something else, whatever that is, right? Hobby for me, I really like going to lift weights and like sitting in a sauna and like.
Yep.
I really like listening to music and going like on a ruck. And the other thing is we hear about this loneliness epidemic, right? And I think COVID helped amplify this a bit.
For sure.
InfoSec was a lonely industry before the loneliness epidemic.
Yeah.
We like by nature are paranoid. We were already working remote before that was cool. If you work in a SOC, sometimes you work literally behind biometric double closed doors from the rest of your company. You are by design contractually isolated from the company you work for.
Right.
Because insider threat is on your radar, right? So like by nature, we are a lonely industry. We also attract a fair bit of neurodivergence, myself included. Like we also attract the people that were really good at computers in the 90s, who maybe didn't have a ton of friends, right? And like, okay, great, all of us. And so now take that, pour gasoline on it with COVID and everything, and then we're still coming out of it. And it's like, hey, the world is not getting more interconnected right now, right? Like
No, definitely not.
We're all kind of living in our own pods. And so I've been a huge proponent of like, I talk to a lot of people, I live in Austin, Texas, right? A lot of people, I hear a lot of people complain about Austin, Texas. If they live there for a little while, or they visited, I don't like it, whatever, right? And then I say, hey, where'd you live? I say, oh, Round Rock, it's a suburb.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, where'd you live? Cedar Park, it's a suburb, right? And I don't like, I'm not crapping on the burbs, do you? But I'm just saying, like, I'm a big proponent of like finding other attachments, like in or out of this industry, just like go bounce off of people.
Yeah, find
right?
people.
I know you're a runner. You go like run clubs are like super cool, or like I have a friend in the industry who lives in Austin. We get coffee every Wednesday morning, right? We go for a walk, like we go for like a ruck, get our blood pumping, and we talk, and it's been like a lifeline for me, right? To just like reality.
Yeah.
It's not like my cave and my code and my
oh my God,
and
yeah.
my incident phone.
It's so
and my
true.
This,
yeah.
And my Twitter and my that. You know, like,
but I mean, that's one of the things that you write about all the time in your newsletter, Vulnerable You, which is great.
Thanks for the shout.
Yeah. I'm a pro.
Vulnu.com. I bought the expensive domain a few weeks ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, go check it out, people, honestly. But I know it's something you think about and write about a lot. Yeah. And there's a lot of people in this industry I know that appreciate that because it's something that they've probably been thinking about themselves or struggling with. And to see somebody like with your profile talk about this stuff, I think makes a big difference.
That's why I'm doing it. It's why it's called Vulnerable You, being vulnerable. Like this is vulnerable that we're talking about it right now, that I'm saying like, oh yeah, I've struggled with this stuff is vulnerable. But if we don't, we're just perpetuating this like lonely problem that like, you know, none of us are solving together. So yeah, I've gotten just a million pieces of good feedback from the stuff I'm doing with the newsletter. It's why I've kept it going for so long consistently, because it's just people reach out and be like, oh, this is needed, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm on X anxiety medication, I'm on this, you know, I feel weird talking about it. I feel like my boss is going to think less of me if I'm on an antidepressant. I feel
there's so many
it's a career
stigmas,
limiting move if I say I need like a mental health like vacation, right? People feel like they need to like earn their time off and like all this kind of stuff, and it's like, yeah, okay, let's talk about this. Let's see just how tech in general, right? It's just a fast paced, a lot of layoffs, a lot of you know, all this kind of stuff. It's rough. It's not a cushy.
It's not the healthiest
cushy industry.
No, not at all.
It's not at all.
Yeah.
Some people are attracted to it. It's like, oh, look, it's like sexy. It's headlines. There's, you know, maybe a bigger paycheck associated to it. But it's like, yeah, there's trade-offs there.
Oh, there's always trade-offs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, Matt, thanks so much for coming up, man. Great to talk to you.
Yeah.
All right. See ya.
Thanks.